Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's stream. My name is Ariana. I am the co-director of the Consent Academy, an international Seattle-based nonprofit that aims to promote consent as part of everyday life. And I hope you're all having a really good day today. Welcome, Krellin, Silly Millie. Nice to see you back, Silly Millie. It's been a while. To Tibron. Thank you for everyone who's joined. I'm pretty excited today um, to talk about some things, and also some of you have pointed out in chat that this is a pretty clickbaity title. I know. Every once in a while, like I just think of a title that's like, oh, that's such a good attention capturing title, and it's hard for me to resist using it. But it fits with what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start with no memes, going to jump right into it. We're going to do a little bit of review of some things we've been talking about, and then we're going to dive into some particularly important concepts and talk about how a really common way that people destroy friendships, relationships, connections with other people, and some antidotes to it. So then, where was I? Sorry, I'm a little frazzled today. It did take like all of my effort to get myself ready for the stream today. I'm like particularly tired and I didn't have very much motivation today. And as just a heads up, I can only stream for an hour and a half today because I have to take my kitties to their vet appointment. Yeah, we'll try to pack a lot of stuff in to that hour and a half. So, where do I want to begin? We're gonna start by yeah, it's just a yearly checkup, but like we're a little bit behind, and this was the only appointment we could really get. They need their shots, so they have to get them every year. They definitely need a teeth cleaning. And I do want to check my cat. One of my cats is a goober, and we're usually really good about it. Like, we don't let them get near the trash, but we had a trash bag that we didn't realize that the cats had access to because we'd meant to throw it away, and we accidentally left it as we were leaving, and he got into it, and he ate some of the sort of like juice absorber that was in this package of like meat that we bought for the cats. And he vomited the whole thing up, and I like looked at it. I like really examined it to make sure like nothing had come out, and it was definitely made of cellulose, not silica, because that would have definitely killed and killed him, or you know, just had more problems, and we would have seen the effects of it much more quickly. And anyway, thankfully, yeah, things happen. This cat is particularly adept at getting into closed rooms, getting into things, and he's always one step ahead of us, like always outsmarting us. So we're going to just, and this was yesterday, so we're just going to take him in and make sure everything's going okay. He doesn't normally eat things that are not food. He just sometimes will eat like rotten food that we've put into the compost because he manages to get into it. And so we keep trying to move it and secure it. Anyway, that's a big digression about my cat, but they're very intelligent, and one of them doesn't really care about getting at food that's not for them, and the other, that is his only mission in life, really. Anyway, okay, let's go back to this. So we have been talking a lot about friendships, but also romantic relationships and other types of connections. And there is basically a theory on the stages of friendship. It's from Rollins. Yeah, exactly, to Tyrone. Something filled with meat juice definitely smelled like, and we've allowed him to like lick the inside packaging because we buy stuff that's like really fresh, and we tend to give them raw meat, which is really good for cats, especially if it's incredibly fresh. It's quite safe, and we let them like lick the juices up and stuff. He's never actually tried to eat the packaging at all before, so this was really new. But yeah, he is a very lovable menace. And it's definitely something where we try really hard to keep our cats safe, to protect them from their own bad habits, and it's regularly difficult. But anyway, just with this one cat, he just wants to eat. things. It's weird. Okay. Um, Tiburón, you said I had a cat like that, or that I had a cat that liked to chew on plastic bags. She didn't eat them, but I've heard this is somewhat common. Yeah, the only thing he does is like when you get up in the morning to pee, he gets one, he's his, I think I've mentioned this before. He loves to pee at the same time as you and like look at you while he's doing it, not just in the morning, but like during the day in general. If you go into the bathroom to pee, we have a litter box in the bathroom next to the toilet, and he really like wants to pee at the same time as you. But first thing in the morning, he loves to lick the like trash bags plastic, just lick it. And apparently, he's just like chronically understimulated, no matter how much playtime we give him. And we give him a lot. Like I give him like 30 minutes to an hour twice a day minimum of playtime. And it's really difficult to keep cats entertained for that long and like make sure that it's dynamic playtime. Anyway, I love my cats very much. And they're people think cats are super low maintenance pets, but people who think cats are super low maintenance, I think a lot of the time just don't know how to like recognize cats expressing their needs. And like if your cat's getting like the zoomies at 3 a.m., like everyone likes to joke about, probably means they need more playtime. Most behavioral issues can be solved through playtime. Anyway, if you want more information on that, hi, Aradin. I recommend Jackson Galaxy, the animal behaviorist. He makes tons of really great YouTube videos that really explain all of this. Okay, digression ended. Okay, so the stages of friendship are basically, the theory is, one of the theories is basically this. Yeah, I agree, Silly Millie. So we have like role limited interaction. That's like the people you're friendly with at work, but you're not really friends with them. Hey, Luby. There are role limited interactions, also might be like classmates, people that you talk to in class, but don't really have any sort of relationship outside of that. Or like if you're a regular at a pub or a cafe and you chat with a little bit like the people who worked there in a friendly manner. Um, exactly, Krellin. He had that show, and it was really good. Like his show is really good about like helping you understand the way cats think. Yeah, I love how many people here like cats. Um, and yeah, we should maybe do. I really want to do a class on like consent in pets, but I honestly could teach a whole class on just like how to be a consensual cat owner or a dog owner or like a rodent owner. I've had a lot of different types of pets, and I'm very like, shit happens, right? Like things go wrong. You cannot literally keep your eyes on a pet 24/7. I had mice and rats, and no matter what kind of cage or like contraption to house them that I had, there would be some who could get out. And what happened with that, it was about not, I had to accept the fact that they would always get out of their cages. And instead, I had to think of what is like multiple layers of protection I can have to make sure that my pet rodent doesn't get out of a place where I can recapture them and out of a place where I can keep them safe, namely my room. And so I very much like to take pet companionship very seriously. And I feel like it is a big consent issue. So I could teach a whole class on just like each of these pets and how to be good consensual pet owners. And like, but it would also be like information on how to do right by different species. But that being said, I'm not an animal behaviorist or a zoologist. I'm just a nerd who likes to read about that kind of stuff for fun. Anyway, back to this. We have role limited interaction. Then we have friendly relations, which is where you kind of go beyond it a little bit. It's the kind of thing where you might go from, I talk to the person who sits next to me at work just in that space, to maybe occasionally we choose to eat lunch together away from our desks. Maybe occasionally we chat a little bit more in the morning. And then moving towards friendship would be something like we might actually intentionally hang out in spaces that are not exactly pre-structured for us. We might start to have a more interactive interactions. We might start to actually want to spend time with each other. Nascent friendship is when you start kind of hanging out. You don't really know each other that well. It still might like be a thing where you're like, okay, actually we're not that compatible. Let's maybe not be friends. But you're probably hanging out quasi regularly. Stabilized friendship is when you're like definitely friends and it's like really good and you can rely on each other in different ways. You can trust each other. And then waning friendship doesn't always happen, but it can. There are other people who've built off of this theory to talk about like recovered friendship, restored friendship, etc. But this is the main idea, is that there are these different stages. The same is really true of romantic relationships, though the shape is a little bit different, right? You don't usually have too much of a role limited interaction. However, I would say that there would need to be like multiple chains, because there's like relationships that build off of like dating apps, or like, dates other people arrange for you, or someone you meet spontaneously at like a bar or at a social activity or like just out in the world. And then there's also people you're becoming friends with, but then sort of branches off and becomes relationships. However, this is, I think, a pretty good model to just kind of keep in your head, which is that friendships take time to build up, relationships take time to build up. And one of the main ways people kill it is either by not maintaining investment in developing the friendship or the relationship. They kind of just think, all right, it's good. I don't really need to keep paying attention to it. Or they try to move way too quickly through these stages. Sometimes it makes sense to, if both people are sort of feeling the same as each other. But other times it can be too much too quickly, right? We've talked about this a lot. If you want more information about it, I suggest going back and looking at some of the previous streams where we've been talking about friendship. Okay, that's the first bit of review. The next bit of review is on Sunday. I specifically, using some questions and scenarios from Reddit, talked about some tools for moving through conflict. And I made this document. I'm going to put it in the chat for everybody who didn't get it. And we can just talk a little bit about some of these tools because they're relevant to everything we're going to talk about. The first thing is to remember that in basically let me actually zoom way in for y'all. In any interpersonal situation, we should assume that there are, in general, 3 possible goals we can have. It can be maintaining the relationship, maintaining self-respect, or getting something that we want. Most of the time, these goals exist in harmony and there's no conflict between them. But a lot of the time, there can be a conflict, right? People will get into an argument and it will become really difficult to get out of it because people get focused on what I want is to win this argument, or I don't realize, but what I'm feeling is I feel threatened by the thing the person has said to me. I feel insulted. So they get so focused on maintaining self-respect that sometimes they, without realizing it, damage the relationship. We're not really going to talk about arguments specifically, but arguments are often a seed for a lot of things that can destroy relationships really quickly, especially if people don't actually feel like they were heard. They didn't get any validation. Maybe they feel really dismissed or discounted. And also if there feels to be like no progress made by having the communicate, because an argument is fundamentally communication with a bunch of emotion in it a lot of the time. Okay, so to move through conflict, you have to share information. You can't really get past something that's gone wrong if you don't communicate that something has gone wrong. If you don't give all the information to the person. If I have, if I'm really, really stressed about certain bits of my clothing, and I really want to make sure that when the laundry is done, that they're cared for in a particular way, I need to communicate to Charlie about that. Now, it can go wrong if, I say to Charlie, hey, be really careful with these objects of clothing of mine when we wash them. They're really delicate. if Charlie was just like, well, then I'll never do the laundry again, right? That is, we'll talk about why that happens a little bit later, but that would make it hard for me then to communicate this information again in the future, because this is one of the things that happens a lot with, for example, people who have adult ADHD and might experience a lot of rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I have a few people I know who experience it really intensely. I experience it too, but I've worked really hard to make it so it doesn't cause this other side effect. If I experience rejection sensitivity dysphoria so intensely that I react incredibly negative to the way a person sets any kind of boundary with me, it becomes impossible for people to set boundaries with me. This is not because I don't want people to set boundaries. It's not because I want power over people. But if I am the kind of person that whenever someone sets a boundary with me or says, hey, this thing didn't really feel very good, this wasn't totally consensual, this hurt my feelings, if I basically lose my shit and either get really defensive or I completely crumble as a person and I just start to say, oh, I'm just the worst person in the world, or any of these things, I then am basically also communicating to the person, whether I mean to or not, you can't set boundaries with me, because it's going to be this big emotional reaction. It might feel like emotional blackmail to the person experiencing it. It might feel like manipulation. It might feel like intimidation. And that's the experience that they're having. It doesn't matter that the reason why I'm doing it is because I have rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Because if people can never communicate to me when I'm crossing boundaries or not making them feel good, that means that they can't communicate to me that I'm crossing boundaries or making them not feel good, right? Like the actual end impact. Impact is always more important than intent. Intent, or also like reasons why something happened, only ever serve really to guide us for how we can prevent something from happening in the future, or better ways to deal with something or manage something when it happens. Okay. So, if you want to keep a relationship with somebody of any kind, I'm glad you find it helpful, Luby. And Silly Millie, this is really common. It's not just people with ADHD who have rejection sensitivity dysphoria, it's anybody. A lot of times people get really afraid of any kind of feedback, basically, about their behavior. And we're going to talk about why. There's a couple of main types of triggers that trigger defensiveness and rejection of feedback. We're going to get to that in a minute. So if you want a connection to last, you have to get past the point of being afraid to say what you really think, feel, want, etc. And you have to get past being afraid of hearing those things from other people as well. We're going to talk about this tool again in a minute, but we're going to skip down here. And another trick is if you catch yourself thinking someone is something, like they are an asshole or they are so stupid, etc., try switching to it being about what they did rather than what they are. For example, that thing they did was so rude and frustrating rather than that person's an asshole, right? So you want to be really careful of that. And it's also important to remember, and again, if you want more information on this, I recommend checking out Sunday's stream, which is titled like Today I Fucked Up, Moving Through Conflict, something like that. So there are three main types of issues. There are problems to be solved. These are things that have an actual solution, right? Like if I was late for work because I forgot to set an alarm and I overslept, that's a problem that has a solution. I need to create a system to make sure that I don't forget my alarm. Most modern phones have the ability to make the alarm recurring, so you don't have to manually set it every day, and you can pick which days. So I would need to make that kind of alarm, so that way it's, without fail. And if the problem was because my phone died because I forgot to plug it in, well, then I'm going to have some kind of routine, maybe even set an alarm on my phone that goes off right about the time I tend to go to bed. So I remember this alarm means I have to plug my phone in. Okay, so problems that can be solved. The next is difficulties to be managed. Difficulties to be managed is a lot of the stuff that we encounter in everyday life. These are things that don't actually have solutions. They cannot be solved and likely can't ever be completely done away with. Such things are like personality disagreements, right? Things that don't totally mesh, ways of slightly different ways of liking to do things or communication styles. Those aren't problems to be solved, they're difficulties that just have to be managed, worked through. One of the problems that happens a lot in any kind of conflict or in any relationship is when we treat something that's a difficulty as though it is a problem. What I mean by that is if I have occasional trouble communicating with Charlie, let's just say we miscommunicate sometimes, that's inevitable. It is inevitable that people miscommunicate. But if I start to treat it as though I believe Charlie's not actually a good listener, now it could be that Charlie isn't a good listener. He is, but for the purpose of this hypothetical, it could be that. But if I start to treat him and his personality as though they are problems to be solved, that's going to be really dehumanizing to him. It's probably not going to make him feel very respected, and it's not likely to work because he's not a problem to be solved. He's not a difficult to be managed. He's a person, but this miscommunication is a difficulty to be managed. What are the structures we can create to make it so that when we miscommunicate, we have ways of managing it? All right, and then challenges to be met. These are lifelong, never-ending issues that we will face and we must interact with them. Things like systemic racism, not sexism, homophobia, etc. So we're all going to have certain levels of internalized racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, and those things are going to crop up in our friendships and relationships. I've had times where people I'm good friends with have said things that I'm like, wow, that's like deeply racist. And, it's going to take me a very long time to like communicate to them why this thing was racist. And so in any situation, there might be all three levels. So my friend making, say, a joke that I find racist, especially, if they're joking about, say, me being a Native American, it happens pretty often. I meet people who have like particular weird fantasies about what it means to be Native or anything like that, and they'll say things to me. And there are all three levels there, right? The first one, the problem to be solved, is the immediate impact of this joke. I need them to tell them that that was not okay, and they need to give me an apology. That's a problem to be solved, the immediate impact of it. The difficulty to be managed is the ways in which maybe I feel as though this friendship has a boundary on it. There's a limitation. I have certain friends that I love very dearly. I really enjoy being friends with them. But because of their lack of awareness about racism and, the fact that they don't really seem to have much desire to actually really learn about racism, means that I can only ever take that friendship so far, which is okay, right? Like I can accept who that person is as a person, still decide I want to be friends with them because there are things that I like about it, but I need to accept the reality of who that person is and then respond to that. So that concept here is also called radical acceptance. It's a concept from Buddhism, but it's also a big part of both cognitive and dialectical behavioral therapy. Radical acceptance. And this is basically the idea that you can't respond to reality if you don't accept reality for what it is. Acceptance here does not mean agreement. It does not mean being okay with something. It means recognition. So, I might have personality clashes with certain family members of mine. I have to accept that certain family members of mine, like I've got an aunt who's like real big into conspiracy theories and like but like weird ones, not like most of the anti-Semitic ones, but like ones where I'm like, I don't like, what are you even talking about? Like thinking like that the sun is like an experiment being done by like aliens who are actually the progenitors of all human beings or something. Where I'm just like, okay, I had to just recognize I want to have a relationship with this aunt. I want to be connected to her. I enjoy hanging out with her. And also, she says real bizarre shit. And I could try to say push back on it, but what is the result of that? She's not going to change her beliefs. It's just going to make the interaction tense and it's just going to make us both feel bad. So I had to decide, do I want this relationship, any relationship with her, more than I say want um, to correct her, to make her stop believing these things? Because I can't. This is too important to her. Yeah, I mean, I think they watch too many sci-fi movies and they're like definitely watched Ancient Aliens a lot on the History Channel and like they were really into the History Channel when it was more respectable and legit than it is now. And they really just like they read all the books from the original Ancient Aliens guy, but then they like really took their own interpretations of it. And they don't actually think that the things like the pyramids were built by ancient aliens, but they do think I think they also just watched the newer Alien movies. Spoiler alerts for that, but like in one of the movies, it sort of revealed that humanity is an experiment um, being done by this like more advanced alien civilization. They look kind of like us, but they're a lot bigger and all these other things, and that the danger aliens are like a bio weapon and everything. Anyway, I think she like watched that movie and kind of like mixed it up with the ancient aliens thing and like it just kind of continued in her brain. Um anyway, she also watches Fox News but hates Trump. She loves Bernie. She's a complex human being like most of us. She contains multitudes. I really like her. I so what I had to do though is I had to recognize sometimes she's got real whack ideas. There's nothing I can do about that. So I can choose, though, how much of a relationship do I want to have with this person? How deep do I want to take that relationship? And I can also choose how do I want to be in those spaces when these things come up. So what I decided with her is, you know what? It doesn't matter. She's going to tell me about this. She's going to whip out the book. She's going to get excited about it. And I can choose to just not really engage with it and focus on appreciating the fact that she enjoys this thing. And I can focus on, if things get political with my family and I don't have the energy for it or I don't want to go to that direction, choosing to not engage. Or I could have family members that, because of their political beliefs, I say, I'm not going to have a relationship with you anymore. But radical acceptance means I accept reality for what it is, rather than feeling sadness and tension at what I wish it would be. Radical acceptance is a really big idea. I've given a really, really simple overview. It is, the way it's written about, you can read a lot about it online. There's a lot of good books about it. It is basically, most of the writing about it is it's been decontextualized from Buddhist thought. So there are aspects that aren't going to be as completely explained or things that aren't going to make as much sense, especially because most people don't really understand that much about like Buddhist ethics and the way Buddhism views things. And so it becomes a lot harder for people to kind of make sense of certain concepts and they try to map them on to sort of equivalent-ish Western concepts. But the main idea of radical acceptance is basically you can't respond well to things that are happening around you if you refuse to accept the reality of the situation. If I spend my whole life wishing my parents were different than they actually are, I'm never going to have a relationship with my parents that feels fulfilling. We all have these mental models of like what an ideal parent is like. And our real human parents, they're people who have good points and bad points and idiosyncrasies, and their own traumas and like their bullshit and the ways in which they're wonderful and charming and giving. And these things are can be very fluid and contextual. The thing is though, is if I'm always comparing my real life parent to the like ideal in my mind, I'm always going to feel as though there's something fundamentally wrong with my parents, right? Instead, what I choose to do is say, I see my parents for who they are without judgment, without blame, without comparison to this ideal that I have inside of me. I'm going to work to let go of that ideal. And I'm going to look at them for who they really are and accept them for who they are. Not does not mean that I endorse everything about them or agree with everything about them. I'm just going to say, yes, this is who this person is. This is my experience of this person. And then from that point, I'm going to decide, how do I want to respond to them? And what do I want our relationship to look like? So this has been a transformational tool that I use in my everyday life all the time. I use it for my friendships, for my romantic relationships, for owning cats, for, living in a city and moving and like my job. I have ideas about what this job should be. And reality does not match that idea. And I had to let go of that idea and just accept reality, which is, it's more work than I get paid for and it's never ending, but I feel like it's worth it. And I can choose, how much of myself I sink into it. Okay. Radical acceptance is also really important when it comes to not destroying friendships and relationships. Because if I start to think, for example, if I find out a friend lied to me, that's a pretty big deal, right? And I start to think, oh, my friend is a liar. Like, how many other things have they lied to me about? And I can't be friends with somebody. How could I be friends with somebody who would lie to me about something? And that's going to make it real easy for my thoughts to spiral and for me to start to distance myself from my friend without necessarily wanting to. There's nothing wrong with deciding you don't want to be friends with someone anymore. However, if we want to give ourselves as much agency as possible when making this decision, we want to make it as actively as possible. These are some things we need to be careful of. Instead, what would be helpful is for me to recognize everybody lies. Lying is actually a really important tool that humans have, and a lot of other animals have. Lying is, pretty common. And it's people do it for all sorts of reasons. And most of us lie, multiple times a day or at least many times a week. And there's all different types of lies. And there's many different reasons why we lie. Exactly. Lying is a social tool. There are lies that are malicious. There are lies that, make something not consensual because information was withheld from us and we wouldn't have consented had we known. There's all kinds of impacts that lies can have. So instead of thinking about who that person is and saying, oh, my friend is a liar, I think, okay, they lied to me in this situation. I'm going to accept how that's making me feel. It's making me feel lack of trust. It's making me feel betrayal. It's also making me feel hurt because I feel like they shouldn't have lied to me about this thing. Exactly, Rodden, especially if you jump from this friend lied to me to all my friends lied to me, so I can't trust anyone. Exactly. That can be really hardcore as well. So then, so then what happens is instead I have to say, here's the impact it's having on me. Then I have to accept, again, everybody lies sometimes for many different reasons. And then I probably want to talk to my friend about, here's the impact I'm feeling from the fact that you lied to me, and ask them to recognize it and apologize for it. The next thing I would want to do is listen for understanding to them. Basically, act as though I'm a detective rather than the person trying to fix the situation, solve the problem. And when I say act as a detective, it means I'm going to go on a journey with that person and I'm going to listen to why they lied. It's the same with like when someone wants to vent. A lot of times people rightly say, you know, if your partner or your friend comes to vent to you, they don't actually want you to try to fix the situation. They want you to listen. And it's only partially right. A lot of the time, people want you to go on the journey with them and help them examine all the aspects of the situation they want to vent about to help them figure out how do they feel about it, if something is bothering them, what and why, and then what maybe they want to do in response. So basically, they want you to help them process. And if I were going to work through a lie or any kind of friendship betrayal with my friend, I would need to treat them in that same way. I would need to want to discuss with them, yo, what was the deal with this? I really want to understand you. Why did you lie to me? Why did you lie about this thing? And is there a way we can make it so in the future you don't feel you need to lie? However, it's also true, just on the side note, people are allowed to keep secrets and keep certain information private. Okay, so setting this part aside, I want to talk a little bit about some concepts. The first one I want to talk about is the idea of the cognitive triangle. I've talked about this before a lot of times, but it's worth talking about again. So the cognitive triangle is a tool from CBT and dialectical behavioral therapy, so cognitive and dialectical behavioral therapies. And it's a concept that describes the relationship between a person's exactly, silly Millie. Surprise parties are almost impossible without lies. The relationship between a person's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. The cognitive triangle is used to help individuals understand how their thoughts, feelings, and actions are interconnected and how they can influence each other. Our thoughts can trigger feelings and compel actions. Our actions can create different thoughts and feelings, and our feelings can give rise to thoughts and urge us to action. So they all influence each other. So here's a breakdown of the components. So thoughts, these refer to ideas, beliefs, or assumptions that a person has about themselves, others, and the world around them. These thoughts can be positive, negative, or neutral, and they can be conscious or unconscious. We often have thoughts we don't realize are there because they happen so quickly, and yet they can have huge impacts. Some examples might be thinking that we are stupid or a failure in response to a small setback. So something small goes wrong. You know, we forgot to attach the PDF to the email we spent 2 hours carefully crafting. And instead of just thinking, oh, silly, I got to attach the PDF and just, you know, whatever, if we think even for just a split second, oh, I'm such an idiot, that's going to impact us, right? And that thought can come and go so quickly, we don't notice it. We only feel its effects. And we might not even realize we're feeling the effects. Those might not also be something we're really consciously aware of. Okay, emotions. Emotions are the feelings that a person experiences in response to their thoughts and the events in their environment. Emotions can be positive, such as happiness or joy, negative, such as anger or sadness, or neutral, such as boredom. It's not uncommon for us to also have primary emotional experiences in response to something that pass so quickly that we don't recognize them and lead to other emotions. And they can go so quickly that we don't recognize the root of our feelings, which can make responding and processing and moving through, say, conflict harder. An example could be something like hurt or surprise often come before anger. So if I get angry at something, maybe anger is the primary emotion, but a lot of the time, before I feel that anger, even for just a moment, I feel something like surprise or hurt. And recognizing those primary emotions is really important information that we can then use to figure out, how do I say I want to repair the situation? What emotions need to be validated, heard, worked through in order to move through this conflict with somebody? Okay. And behaviors. Behaviors refer to the actions that a person takes in response to their thoughts and emotions. These actions can be conscious or unconscious. Hold on one second. My notes are like not showing up all the way at the bottom for some reason. Google starts sliding all the way down. weird. I hate it when this happens, when it's like cut off at the bottom. That's fine. I'm gonna move up. Um, it's just like cut off at the bottom. That's so weird. There we go. There we go. Um, okay. So, what was I saying? Emotions, behaviors refer to the actions that a person takes in response to their thoughts and emotions. These actions can be conscious or unconscious, and they can be helpful or unhelpful or neutral. So in CBT, this cognitive triangle is used to help people identify and change negative patterns of thinking and behavior that may be causing distress or interfering with our daily functioning. By understanding the interplay between thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, we can develop strategies to manage these things. Remember, these are not problems to be solved. They're difficulties to be managed a lot of the time. Sometimes there can be a problem to solve within there. But the ways our thoughts, feelings, and actions all influence each other, and especially negatively, is for the most part a difficulty that we have to manage. We're never all going to just have like perfect, like nothing ever maladaptive or, cognitively distorted or incorrect ever passes into our brains. Exactly. I think, Salimili, you've got it. I say ouch frequently when I'm surprised or startled, but didn't actually feel any pain. Exactly. I think that's a great example. Okay. And we can also figure out intervention points, like where can I start to modify things? Okay. So with Arad, you said I say oof when I expect something to hurt, even if it doesn't. Yeah. So then let's look at another concept here. So we have an idea here of common barriers to feedback. And I would say that there are 4. Some like social scientists would say there's only 3, but I would really add this 4th one in. So the most common ones are the who do you think you are? I can't hear this information coming from you. So this is basically the relationship. The particular person giving us the feedback. We react based on what we believe about the giver. Even if the feedback is good, we will always interpret it through the lens of our relationship to the person giving it and what we believe about the person or how we feel treated by the giver. This might be something like believing someone has no credibility to give the feedback, or feeling that the feedback the person means the person doesn't love us anymore, or doesn't care about everything we have done for them, etc. Nice, Silly Millie. I'm glad. I think it's really good. So this could be something like, we've done so much for this person. How could they be saying this to me? We end up ignoring the feedback and focusing on the idea of the audacity we believe the person is displaying. This is especially relevant in many of the interactions that we have that become conflicts. Because if I feel like it's rude for a person to be saying this to me, or I feel like it's somehow like a violation of the relationship that we have, it's going to be really, really hard for me to hear it, even if it's just something like the person setting a boundary with me. An example that comes up a lot is like, as kids move into adolescence, especially late adolescence, and they start to want to assert more and more boundaries, especially things like privacy. Like they might want to be able to close the door to their bedroom. They might want to be able to, look at pornography without their parents monitoring that. They might want to be allowed to do something like masturbate without their parents monitoring that, or like walking in on them. Parents can sometimes react to that with, how dare you like try to set this boundary with me? Don't you realize how much I've done for you? Therefore, I should be allowed to do this thing. This is not to say that that's always this like super non-consensual kind of reaction to things, but if I feel like, I've constantly helped somebody all the time, and then they're suddenly telling me I'm not being very helpful, I might feel really upset about that. Okay, the next one is the who do you think I am? Meaning this information is threatening to my sense of identity, myself, and my mind is in disarray. So this is the identity crisis. So regardless of the feedback being given, Um, Regardless of the quality of it, it makes our sense of self feel threatened. So this happens a lot where if we get feedback that makes us think, if this is true, I must be a bad person. And I don't want to be a bad person. If this is true, I'm a fraud. If this is true, I don't deserve to be with this person. If this is true. And so, it's one of those things where if I think, for example, I'm really talented at playing the violin, and that's like especially part of my sense of my identity, and someone comes along and tries to give me feedback on my violin playing, uh, then I might not be able to hear that because if I might have this belief, if I need any feedback on my violin playing, I'm not really good at playing the violin. And so this means I can't hear feedback. Okay, the next one, this can't be real. This is basically the information itself is threatening. And I can't believe this information because I think it is mistaken, unfair, or unhelpful, useless, and responding to it as a distraction. So if someone comes and tells me, I'm doing some kind of thing all the time and it's bad, and I don't actually think it's bad, I'm not going to listen to them. If somebody says, like, I've had people tell me many times in my life, I'm too confident and I speak too much like a man, I don't give a shit. That feedback, I tried to think about what was actually being told to me in that feedback, and I tried to give it the like most good faith analysis because I got it a lot. And it did, I think, lead to some improvements in my behavior, like making sure I don't interrupt people as much. And I try to listen to, listen for understanding more rather than listening for the things that I'm going to want to respond to. Yeah, I breathe too much air, whatever, get bent. Yeah. And so this is that the information itself is a threat, and I don't want to believe it, or I don't think it's useful. Yeah, so Ditchabron, some of this is from Thank You for the Feedback. This is not stuff that's like exclusively limited to that book. There has been good research on this in general, but definitely that book, for anybody who wants to know more about this, is totally what I would recommend. I think it's an excellent book. But the book doesn't talk about the last one, which is, what are you talking about? The manner or the method blocks the message. I can't listen to what you are telling me because it is unclear, confusing, vague, or it's not the right moment to give it. This most often happens when the fact that a person is giving us feedback feels like, for example, non-consensual. So one time, for example, I was in a French class many, many years ago, and someone came up to me to give me like genuinely useful feedback about a mistake I was making that I didn't even realize I was making. So the way I was pronouncing the word I was pronouncing it like je, I didn't even realize I was pronouncing it that way, but that actually means I have instead of I. And so, yeah, or like I am, right? Depending on the rest of the sentence. And so it's a big mistake that I was making, and I didn't even realize I was mispronouncing it. And it wasn't that I was doing it all the time, but because the teacher said to me afterwards when I asked her about it, she's like, no, you don't do that all the time, but like it does happen sometimes. But the thing is, it was in the middle of class, and we had all of our desks like in a big square, so we all kind of faced each other into the center of the room, and we were on a break for 5 minutes, and the girl who gave me this feedback immediately stands up at the break, comes over to me, and she's like, you always say this word wrong. And she's like, just so you know, you're making a big mistake all the time. And that wasn't, yeah, it just didn't feel good. She didn't ask me if I wanted feedback. And it's not that I didn't think that she couldn't give it to me, because we were in the same class. And we regularly, as part of the way the teacher taught, would give each other feedback on our speaking and our grammar. So that was part of the culture of the class. It wasn't that I believed that I was already good at French. It was like a B2 class that's like upper intermediate, but is it's just, like I was aware that I still was learning, right? And I'm aware that I have an American accent when I speak French. I have no sense of threat there. I believed that the information could be true. I didn't think it was mistaken or unfair or useless, but it was the fact that she didn't ask me. She didn't consider that maybe I didn't want to have a mistake I was making drawn attention to very loudly in front of all of these people. And she used a lot of extreme language, like always. Big mistake. The thing is, though, I had been living in France for 2 years at that point. I worked in a French speaking environment, and I'm sure I made this mistake fairly often, but it never impacted people's ability to understand me, and nobody was correcting me on it. So I was just like, okay, I feel like this is a little bit of an exaggeration, which is a bit of this, like, I think it's a little bit mistaken. But the bigger thing was, I just was like, wow. It was basically a very non-consensual situation. She did not ask me if I wanted advice. And I didn't have the opportunity to say no. And I didn't have the opportunity to say, yes, but not right now. I'm trying to take a break. Or can we do this, privately? Or like, could you text me the information instead? It was just came up to me, says very loudly in front of everybody. And that basically meant that I was just like, no, I don't think you're correct. And that was because I had a defensive reaction to it, which is very normal. And Silly Millie, you brought up a really good point. Mid-stall is the wrong time to give a pilot a lecture on improving vehicle handling characteristics during emergency situations. Exactly. So giving it feedback at the wrong time can also be a way that people can't hear feedback. And Luby, you said, anytime someone tells me I always or never do something, I get skeptical. For sure, because that's often a cognitive distortion. And then Aradin, you said, it sounds like they were doing it for themselves rather than for you. Maybe. I don't think so. I think that this person was trying to be genuinely helpful. And one of the things I recognized is I used to do that kind of thing. Not for me, not because I wanted to be like the smartest person in the room or to show off, but because I thought genuinely that people would want to know. I used to correct people's misinformation a lot because I thought, I like it if people correct my misinformation because I don't like walking around with incorrect beliefs as much as possible. I like to have that corrected. I'm like super open to that. And I used to think other people were that way too. And some of it was ADHD, like just impaired social skill development and not realizing appropriacy and not realizing like unspoken social norms, not realizing that it wasn't always like I used to do that thing of like, your joke is factually incorrect rather than just like laughing at the joke or just like even just acknowledging that the person was trying to make a joke. I would just be like, actually, that doesn't make any sense because blah, 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 blah. And it's not because I was doing it for myself. It's not because I was like self-aggrandizing. It's because I'm neurodivergent and I had shit social skills and like maybe to many extents still do have not, like there are some ways in which this is a very common neurodivergent trait, which is like because we have impairments in like typical social development, a lot of us will really like hyper focus on the skills that are really possible to learn, like to study. And so I've studied a lot of these kinds of things, which is really useful in my daily life. I'm really good at teaching things. I have like real good self-awareness of my emotions and how they're impacting me. And I don't have chill or like good ability to banter. And like, I don't always pick up on the vibe, for example. And those are skills that are harder to teach and they're more unspoken, subconscious. And those are the things that are often impaired with any kind of neurodiversity. And so it's the most neurodivergent people when they get to adulthood will be really, really like It's like you always skip leg day. So you're like super buff up top, and then your legs are just like sticks, right? Silly Millie, poorly communicated feedback can be a sign of poorly developed social skills associated with neurodivergence. Exactly, 100%. And it's not always neurodivergence. That can just be a common cause. But a lot of people don't have good social skills. A lot of people are not tactful. Even if what the thing they're trying to say is really good, if they're not good at communicating it, if it's not clear, if it's not tactful, if it's kind of rude, it's not going to work. Okay. So, putting all of this together, I wanted to share some of these things with you because I want to talk about a really important concept. So, we looked at previously this list of supportive characteristics in a friendship and non-supportive characteristics in a friendship. And the one that I think is often the most common to develop over time, and one of the most toxic, caustic things to keeping a sustainable friendship is this top one here, contempt. So, contempt, bitterness, I would also say, like, feeling kind of jaded about things, etc. So, contempt is basically when we feel some level of disgust for or rejection of who we believe the person is as a person. And that's really easy to build up. It's really easy for our regard for the people we're in any kind of connection with to degrade over time, especially over time with small things that build up. If I have small boundary crossings that happen a bunch over time, and I maybe don't say anything about it because it's too small, I don't want to make a fuss, and on some level, I believe that the person just kind of like should know that you don't do this thing, right? Like, let's say my partner is helping me put the dishes away, and like they don't live with me, it's my place, and they're over and they're helping me clean, and instead of putting all the spoons and forks and knives in the right spot, they just kind of pile it all in there, all messy kind of thing. That's not a big deal, but it's a small boundary cross. It's like, okay, well, now I'm going to have to go fix it, or like it's going to be harder. It's not how I like to have my cutlery, hi, kettle stick, arranged. And it's not a big deal. But if that kind of thing happens a lot and I never communicate those boundaries, or if I do and they're not really heard or taken seriously, that's going to build up bitterness and contempt. And that is one of the most common things that like leads to things falling apart. The other one that's the most common, which we've talked about a lot, is not communicating, right? And they're often related. A lot of contempt and bitterness builds up because we don't communicate about something. And remember, communication is not just about uh, it's not just about me not saying something, right? Communication theory kind of says there's many different points that communication can fail. There's the me having the idea that I want to communicate. Then there's the words I use to say it. Then it passes through, which are passing through my experience of culture. Then there's like the message in the middle, then it gets filtered through culture again, and then it's interpreted by the other person. And all of those stages, there are failure points that can happen. And so if communication isn't good, it allows exactly, Rodden, resentment, bitterness, and eventually contempt. So if you want to make sure that your relationships, regardless of the type, are supportive and sustainable, we have to be really careful about resentment, bitterness, and contempt. So the main tool I want to talk to you all about today, and we touched on it really briefly on Sunday, is the concept of unconditional positive regard. So, okay, what is unconditional positive regard? It's kind of going to sound a bit extreme, but I promise it's not like as extreme as it might sound. So, unconditional positive regard is kind of exactly like what it sounds like. It means you assume the best in people. And when people are doing things that are not great, we don't assume it's because this person is anything. We assume they're a person. Good and bad are not qualities we're going to talk about for who they are, but things that they do. So, for example, I once had a friend who, like, I don't remember what it was about, but it was something that was actually like quite surprising. Um, uh, and I take your point, silly Millie. Like, contempt can be resentment that is allowed to fester, but contempt can also be caused by other things. I would say that that's probably true. Um, and good sort of like semantic precision to have. But I do think that often contempt is resentment that has been allowed to fester. Um, and like, because I think that's how often people, like in marriages, for example, they start to resent these small things. And then over time, they get to a point where they're like, I don't even like this person anymore. It's like not even that I'm not in love with them anymore, but I don't even like them anymore. And I would say that's often because lots of small resentments fester into becoming contempt. Okay. So, unconditional positive regard, going back to that, I was going to give an example. I had a friend many years ago. I don't remember what it was about, but he kind of got it in his head that I was an unreliable person. And he like was really on my case about it. He felt really like sure that this meant that like I wasn't a good friend. And I remember it was like something that I was like, it's kind of bullshit that you're actually even expecting this thing of me. I think it was like for me to like pay for some things of his. I don't know. He really wanted me to, I don't know. He was a weird, spoiled guy. But he started to think that I was unreliable. And I was really confused by this because I was like, well, we're roommates and like I always do the laundry, I always do the dishes, we always take the trash out. Like I'm very consistent about a lot of things. So I was very much like I would not say I'm an unreliable person. And he had a very hard time not engaging in very black and white thinking. But we talked a lot about it and kind of worked through it eventually because I tried to say to him like all personality traits are contextually dependent. So like I can be a big weirdo nerd sometimes. I can be the kind of person who like doesn't recognize when things are jokes, takes everything really literally, gets really like very, very like focused on like factualness and stuff about things. But that's not true of me 24/7. There are many times when I can just be chill and when the vibes are right and I kind of like fit in well, there can be things that are no problem. I am sometimes a shit listener. I have to tell Charlie almost every day, hey, can you repeat the last like 5 minutes because I wasn't listening? It's almost always because Charlie said something that inspired a thought and then I was gone. And it's not usually 5 minutes, it's usually like the last 30 seconds. And it's one of those things where it's like, I can be a really bad listener, but also people regularly tell me I'm a very good listener because in certain contexts, I'm really good at putting on I'm performing psychological first aid, I'm doing active and reflective listening hat. And when I can get myself to remember, this is the mode I am in right now, I'm a rock star listener. I will help people really well work through what it is that's going on in their heads and figure out how they feel about it. So, almost all personality traits are contextually. Thank you, Kettlestick. You say, I am a very good listener when you're focusing on it 100%. Yeah, but when I'm not focusing on it, I'm not. And I also can be in denial a lot and just be like on my phone and be like, I can listen. This is fine. But the reality is, Not really. Not really. So all personality traits are contextually dependent. So instead of getting into a place where we think this person is something and I resent the thing that they are, we want to start by coming from a place of unconditional positive regard. So I'm going to paste this in the chat and we're going to read this one. So you're really lifting your own spirit because we're going to talk about what it is and what the benefits are. So this is going to be good for not only your relationships of any type, but also for yourself. So you may already know that having a positive outlook can affect your life for the better. The power of positive thinking, also known as manifestation, is a popular method for bringing more bliss into your everyday life. So I want to be clear, I'm not a huge fan of like manifesting, like as in the book The Secret, which is just like whatever is in your life is based off of the thoughts that you have. But I'm very much of the kind of mindset that trying to have a genuine, based in reality, but positive baseline way of approaching things is good for us. If I have constant negative self-talk, that's going to be really hard. Now, you can choose neutrality. Just like, there's body positivity, but there's also body neutrality. I don't have to love my stretch marks and call them tiger stripes. I'm allowed to just feel nothing about them, for example. And so I do want to say that like a neutral regard for people is also pretty legit, but there are some benefits of positive regard. Silly Millie, you said, slight aside, I wish I could get people to repeat exactly what they just said when I ask, what did you just say? And they say the same thing differently when I could ask, could you restate that? I don't understand. I didn't understand. Yeah, I mean, I agree, but also 90% of the time, if people ask me, can you repeat what you just said? I'm like, I don't know what I just said. I maybe wasn't involved. Because I will often have no memory of what it was I just said. And yeah, Rodden, a lot of people do. They're like, my stretch marks are actually tiger stripes. And part of that comes from the fact that like puberties that, especially that AFABs tend to go through, because of certain increases of certain types of estrogen at certain types of times, stretch marks are basically an inevitable byproduct. Almost every AFAB is going to have stretch marks because that went through puberty without any sort of intervention, because the estrogen basically will cause stretch marks to happen no matter what, if not necessary. And so a lot of people wanted to like turn this into an empowering thing. Krellin, you said, I'm pretty sure I would never be able to 100% repeat what I just said. Yeah, I've considered like carrying around a little tape recorder all the time, Krellin, but what did you just say isn't specific enough as it could mean either you need to say repeat or restate. Yeah, but I also think people might not listen to the precision of words that much because I think that a lot of people are just kind of going with the general vibe. Yeah, silly Millie. Stretch marks can be caused by everything from weight gain to growth spurts to hormones to pregnancy. But I know that the tiger stripes thing started in sort of women's body positivity and like the information that stretch marks were an inevitable part of puberties that AFABs tend to go through. Really inspired people. Okay, so less discussed, however, is the huge impact that unconditional positive regard can have on both your mental state and your capacity for joy. While the term has been used in the psychology world for decades, this mindset can also be applied to everyday life with major benefits. So it also can be considered something like loving kindness, and that's a concept that comes from Buddhism that has been really adopted in psychology as well. So here's the lowdown on unconditional positive regard and why it can change your life for the better and how to start practicing it today. Okay, unconditional positive regard is simply accepting others unconditionally no matter what. So we can think about it also as a type of radical acceptance, which is I accept that this person is a person and that means that they're going to have strengths and weaknesses and things that I love about them and things that are difficult about them. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's also the ability to withhold judgment, right? Like if I immediately meet somebody and they're a little, say, snippy with me, and my first thought is, wow, this person is an asshole, that's going to probably make me feel bad, actually, about other people, about the world, about my interactions with people. If I instead think, I wonder if that person's having a really bad day or if they didn't sleep well. It doesn't mean denying that a person, say, was rude to me, but it means that I don't immediately jump to thinking this person is garbage. I think that didn't feel great and keep it at that. So the term unconditional positive regard is credited to Carl Rogers, a humanistic psychologist who was rather radical in his day. Rogers started a therapy revolution by validating his clients' feelings and offering a supportive atmosphere that was built on a foundation of human connection. He believed that having compassion and acceptance towards others was the key to helping them, not shaming or punishing people for their thoughts and actions. Rogers approached therapy with an unconditional positive regard towards his clients, meaning that he showed them unconditional acceptance and warmth, believing that empathy could be a catalyst for change. So this is a big deal here because if I am, for example, afraid of being rejected, let's say I had I'll do something really common. Let's say I had like a minor fetish or kink that I felt was really important to me, but I was afraid to tell my partner about it because I was pretty sure that they were going to not only not share it, but maybe say break up with me because of it. And, there's plenty of desires that we can have sexually that if we act on them might be harmful, but there are no that are like inherently in and of themselves, like you're a bad person for having that. There's a difference between the things that we think and feel and desire and the things that we choose to do. So, for example, if I had a fantasy about, say, like breaking into people's houses and stealing their underwear, and that was like a big, like, turn on for me, that doesn't mean I'm actually going to do that to people. And it doesn't mean that I'm inherently criminal or dangerous. I don't have that kind of kink, but I think it's not that uncommon. So it's a situation where if I feel afraid that I'm going to be judged and potentially rejected, especially intensely rejected, I'm never going to be able to communicate to my partner about this desire. We're never going to be able to potentially talk through it. I can't share that side of myself, which will likely also make me feel like I shouldn't share a lot of other things about myself. But also, it might mean that we miss out on playful adventures. And it could also mean that this person, they might tell other people that they think I'm like creepy or bad or dangerous or a predator, even though I might never actually do those things. It's just a fantasy or a desire. And okay. So if I had something, though, that I wanted to change about myself, it becomes even more essential that I feel safe to actually talk about it, right? Like, I have little parts of me that are not nice. I can sometimes really, really want to like take somebody down, especially if I think that they're causing a lot of harm and they're in a position of power that they don't deserve to be in, and they're using that to cause harm. And some ways that's like ethical and not a bad thing. And there are other ways where I know I take it too far and like can get into like trash talking and stuff like that. And if I want to change that, I have to start by being able to accept that thing about myself. But I'm also going to need the people who are going to support me in changing that to be able to accept that about me too. And so continuing, so unconditional positive regard means that personal opinions should be set aside in order to connect with someone, and that no matter what, everyone has value. So this is the other big thing. This is actually really hard. I want you to think for a moment. Do you actually believe that everyone has value? Because I have people I have a hard time accepting have value, right? I think it's the whole like, would you travel back in time to kill baby Hitler kind of question. That question is also about, do I think Hitler has value as a person and could become something else? I'm a lot more like, go back in time and like kidnap baby Goebbels and Hitler and like raise them in a different environment and maybe they turn out to not be like mass murderers, but you know, but I also don't begrudge people for having those fantasies, right? Or like thinking that that would be the right thing to do to like go back in time and kill baby Hitler, right? Because again, I think it makes sense to have that kind of thought. And I think it makes sense, like, that's part of my unconditional positive regard. Um, and it's tough because, like, there are lots of people out there that I really don't like. And I'm very happy with the fact that I'm probably never going to have to interact with them again. But I have to be able to hold inside of myself the idea that that person is still valuable as an individual, that they still have a right to say, be alive. But I would imagine most of us don't have that. Like, I don't feel that way about Hitler, for example. I don't like, and I wish I could. And the ways I try to like, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about this particular individual and like trying to cultivate positive regard for them. I think that's pretty pointless. And also, like, why would I spend my time focusing on Hitler? But for the sake of talking about this in the thought experiment, that's why we're focusing on this, not because I actually, dedicate any amount of time or energy to thinking about Hitler in this way. But if I were going to, I would need to find other ways to do it, like imagining kidnapping baby Hitler and raising him in a bit better environment, right? Uh, and yeah, so Paladin Hulk, positive regard for everyone until they prove unworthy, I think is a common middle ground a lot of people come to. But I think it's worth examining, what does that unworthy even mean? Kettle stick, okay, you could totally redirect Hitler pretty easily, so you don't have to kill a baby. Just go to that art school and be like, hey, accept this Hitler guy into your art school. Just trust me. Almost certainly solves the problem just as well. Yeah, maybe. And silly Millie, but maybe baby Hitler led to the death of world ender. You just can't ever know. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, you can't ever know, but also, like, on that note, I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to go too far into this analogy, but, um, worthy, unworthy. This is one of those things that I think is, yeah, tangent. Everyone's going to define for themselves. This is not me saying this is what you should do. What I'm saying is, at the very least, try to cultivate it for the people you have relationships with. You don't have to hold it for everybody on the planet. You don't have to, like, try to think positively about somebody who, say, really hurt you. But for the relationships you want to have and want to maintain, it's important, I think, to try to cultivate positive regard, to assume the best in people. If someone is being an asshole, it's not because they are an asshole. It maybe they're just in a bad mood. Maybe they need some tools that they don't have. Now, I want to also really caution people. There's a popular idea that has, I think, really invaded a lot of thinking about things like accountability, which is the idea of wanting to root everything in trauma. A lot of the times people want to say, like, anytime someone is harming other people, it's because of their own damage or their own trauma. And I don't actually think that that's true. That's actually a very neo-Freudian concept. And it's important to remember that Freud was very famous for basically believing all of personality was fixed from early childhood, was all completely based off of early childhood psychosexual experiences with our primary caregivers, and basically didn't think culture had anything to do with anything. Freud had a lot of good ideas and a lot of shit ideas, and not everything that people do that's harmful is rooted in damage or trauma. Sometimes people can just be an asshole. Sometimes people can just be mischievous. Sometimes, there's lots of different reasons why we can do things. But the point is still thinking that that person has value, kind of regardless. These things don't have to be mutually exclusive. All right, so I'm going to want to end the stream in just a few minutes, just as a reminder, because I have to take my cats to the vet. And I think Freud more like wanted to fuck his daughter, but I'm not sure. Anyway, this practice differs from unconditional love. The latter assumes feelings of affection while the former doesn't. You don't need to like someone. This is really important. You don't need to like someone to act towards them with unconditional positive regard. You just need to believe that they are worthy of acceptance and respect. So what are some of the benefits of this? Just like there are a number of benefits of thinking positive thoughts, there are many upsides to practicing unconditional positive regard. This practice can be applied to any person or any relationship at any time. Here are 5 of the main benefits. So, unconditional positive regard strengthens connections with other people. More than anything, approaching people with unconditional positive regard builds connection. When you see others as humans, flawed yet perfect at the same time, you're more able to identify with them, feel empathy toward them, and create bonds that may not have formed otherwise. So this is really tough because sometimes when we meet people, we write people off really quickly. We base things, and remember when we were doing this research on friendship processes, when we're reading it, it was very clear that that's a very common thing that people do. People tend to write people off really quickly based off of initial impressions. But if we cultivate inside of us the ability to think of everybody as being valuable, that's really, really useful. This is useful when it comes to things like ageism or fat phobia or sexism or racism. If I'm the kind of person who thinks, oh, this old dude can't have anything of value to contribute, if I go around and just think like every, old white guy is clearly going to be a sexist, misogynistic asshole who never has anything of value to say, I might mistreat people. And I might mistreat people who would have been really good friends and who I might genuinely have loved being connected to. And this can go in any direction, right? This is not me just saying particularly have sympathy for, old white guys or something. But I think in some circles, there is this general idea that certain groups of people would never have anything of value to contribute. And I think we need to be careful of that. Now, we can talk about the reasons why that kind of thought develops, mostly in response to pain and stress as a defense mechanism. But for our own interpersonal experiences, it might be helpful to think otherwise. Now, I still take the quote of if 10,000 snakes were coming at you and you could shut the door and 9,999 of them were venomous and were going to hurt you, but one of them was not, would you leave that door open just so the one could come in, is also legit. So I'm trying to balance a lot of these different things simultaneously, just to be clear. Okay. So as you begin approaching everyone you meet with acceptance and respect, you open your heart and make possible more chances for connection. This practice enables you to become a person that others want to be around because as you see the value in people, they feel that energy emanating from you. So this is also the spontaneous attribution, spontaneous trait attribution that we talked about a few weeks ago, which is that whatever traits we assign to other people, people will be likely to assign to us. So if you always kind of talk about how people are stupid or incompetent or like terrible at this or that, or everybody just sucks so much, people are also going to think that way about you over time. One of the other things you can do is choose to do this in context dependent spaces. If I'm going to go to a party, if I start to go in thinking I'm not going to connect with any of these people, I'm going to have a miserable time and talking myself out of it, I might choose, hey, for the, 45 minutes I'm going to stay at this party, I'm going to pay attention to people, use active and reflective listening, try to actually listen for understanding, coming from the place of believing everybody's got interesting things to say. I just need to listen to be able to hear what is interesting inside the thing that they're saying. Okay. And you can choose to use this in like certain scenarios. You don't have to apply this 24/7. Because also I one of the problems with like the power of positive thinking is sometimes like gaslight yourself. And it's like that's not what I'm saying. But starting from the place of believing everybody has value as a person is really important. The different people that we say are criminals, the people who've like done these heinous things, the people who've mistreated you in the past, they also have value as individual human beings. And they're not going to be what they are to you is not going to be what they are to every person they ever interact with. It's also important to remember there are people I have been very hurt by who I know are loved and cherished by a bunch of people. And I don't think that the people who love and cherish that person are wrong or bad for feeling that way. And there are people that I love and cherish who I know have hurt other people and are, like both of my parents. They like hate each other's guts, basically. And they both hurt each other a lot during their divorce. And I love them both. And like, I can accept that, like, they both were raging douchebags during their divorce. And also that, like, they're still people worthy of love and respect. Right. And honestly, both of them would be mad about me saying they both were bad in different ways. They'd be like, well, this one hurt me more in this way. And like, but what about this? And I'm like, yeah, for sure. There's some things that happened that are like way fucked up. And also, I can still love both of them. Okay. So, unconditional positive regard makes you less negative and judgmental. As you move through the world, seeing others as worthy of acceptance and respect, you start to tear down the walls of negativity and judgment. Unconditional positive regard allows you to see the best in people, not the worst. It keeps you from jumping to conclusions. So this is one of the things that comes up a lot when we talk about some scenarios from Reddit. We often, either in our own processing of it, but also in the comments, can see a lot that people tend to jump. Thank you, Silly Millie. People tend to jump to the conclusion that is the worst and assume the worst in people. And that's often a self-defense mechanism. It's a way to keep us from ever getting very close to people. But again, you're going to kill relationships if you keep yourself from ever getting close to people. Anyway, thank you, Arad and Silly Millie. Let's go ahead and stop here for today. If you're enjoying this, I actually really want to recommend you take our class that's going to be this Saturday on accountability pods. Because some of the stuff I'm talking about today, we're going to go into much more in depth in this class. So follow that link to our calendar and you can get tickets for that. And then also remember to follow us on social media. And as always, please check out our Patreon. Hi, Dustin. Thank you. I am possibly not going to be here for the stream on Sunday. I think I have a conflict, but I will see if somebody else can run the stream on Sunday. I will keep you all posted on Discord and on Twitter, so just keep an eye out there. And otherwise, I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!